What's going on, everyone? It's hour number 2 on this Thursday evening. It's Dan Zangrilli here on the Voice of Pittsburgh, News Radio 1020 KDKA. Thanks for being with us. Let's go to the Disc Institute of Pittsburgh Newsline. My guest is Patty Olinger. She is the infectious disease expert, executive director of the Global Biorisk Advisory Council. And we want to talk to her about something that I saw in the New York Times. And that is that a new study warns that the strain of the H1N1, the common on China's pig farms since 2016, should be urgently controlled to avoid another pandemic. And we'll probably talk a little COVID-19 as well with Patty. Patty, welcome to KDKA Radio in Pittsburgh. How are you?
Pretty good. Thank you for having me.
So, are you familiar with, well, obviously H1N1, yes, but this strain that's in China, that it's been spreading silently from what we understand in workers on a pig farm in China, and we're being told that it should be urgently controlled to avoid another pandemic. Is that hype, or is this another real threat that's lurking around the corner?
It's probably, well, the reality is that it is an H1N1 virus that they've been watching here for a while with regard to the pig farms in China. It recently was identified having been able to go from pigs to humans. It has not caused disease yet, but some of the workers, they were able to culture it from their throats. And so that's concerning because that's what they call a spillover. And even though it hasn't caused disease yet, that's one of those first steps of where you start watching it and really paying close attention, because we don't want that to become like 2009, a pandemic, H1N1 flu.
Patty Olinger, our guest, infectious disease expert, the executive director of the Global Biorisk Advisory Council. Tell everybody a little bit what you do, Patty, first off.
Sure. So actually, it's the Global Biorisk Advisory Council, GBAC, GBAC. We're a division of ISSA, and ISSA is the world leading trade association for the cleaning and professional disinfection communities. So what we have done for several years now is provide training for those who are on those front lines for response to situations that are involving biological agents or biological materials in general. We're looking at that prepare, respond, recover. We had to shift here quickly and do a lot of online training. And then we also launched our GBAC STAR Facilities Accreditation Program about a month ago, helping facilities reopen and then look towards the future for prepare, respond, recover in the event that we had another pandemic.
Patty Olinger, our guest, expert on infectious diseases. So how concerned are you when you read what I read yesterday in the New York Times about this new strain? If you could quantify. What it does is
it makes you sit up and take pause and really pay attention. And it's one of those things that, well, not to put it to the side and not pay attention, but making sure the good thing that I would say that we have identified this early is that, we can look at our vaccines for this coming flu season or what we might need to do and ensure that we have, the antivirals available for H1N1 type flus. So we have the ability to prepare. The other thing is to remember is that we've been doing a lot of preparedness and a lot of reopening activities for COVID-19. And we would be looking at a lot of the same work practices and a lot of the same procedures for, hand washing, not touching our face, wearing masks, as well as cleaning, disinfection, and what we call or what we refer to as infection prevention measures.
Patty, so how are we going to, and this is more of a foreign relations question, I suppose, but how do you deal with the lion's share of these issues coming from China, from a strategic standpoint, I suppose, from a logistical standpoint? Anything in particular? I mean, I guess what we do have is we have lead time, so we're able to certainly prepare, but obviously COVID has changed the game for not only the here and the now, but how we're going to deal with this moving forward. So I guess that's the genesis of my question.
Sure. When we look at, I guess, some of the gaps in our response this time, I actually had written an article back in September. Well, it was October. It was published in January, and the underlying, title was "The Pandemic is Coming and We're Not Prepared." And it really was focusing on a lot of the first line of defense. And being in the cleaning industry, I was, really focused on what we can do, out in the public for even something simple like cleaning, disinfection. And what we're seeing now is those social distancing and work practices that we can put in place in the event that there was an epidemic or pandemic. When the pandemic hit, it really highlighted some of those. And so when we're looking forward and looking at what we need to do in the future, one, we need to really pay attention to things like this and those ability to look at, outbreaks that are happening in different parts of the world and pay attention to those. Those are really important. Our, borders, when people are coming to the United States, or if we're going to some other country, we go through customs, and there's going to be a lot of, screening through those customs areas. And also looking at what type of training, our first line of defense folks, our responders, our first responders need to have. Those are things that we're really going to need to focus in the future and not forget what we've done in the last few months when this pandemic subsides.
Patty Olinger, Executive Director, Global Biorisk Advisory Council. She's leading the trade association for the cleaning industry worldwide, talking about measures that we can certainly take here with COVID, but also, I guess, what we can do with when you see the news reports that scientists say that a new strain of swine flu virus is spreading to humans in China. Measures that people can take, Patty, without, I guess, going overboard, because we are told in the same breath that you do need to be around some form or fashion of germs and disease to keep your immune system in a healthy place. So how do you strike that common balance there?
You're absolutely right. I grew up out in the country and on farms and, was playing out there all day long. There are some things, when we're in the midst of a pandemic or an epidemic, some type of infectious disease outbreak that we can all do. The whole issue with wearing a mask, I know people see it as a controversy, but it's a very simple thing that we can do when we're looking at an airborne pathogen or even a droplet infectious disease that, can cause, infection. We can wear those when we're out in public. Social distancing, keeping, that 6 feet away from other individuals that are not part of your family, say. And then just a simple act of washing our hands, using hand sanitizers. Those are things that we personally can control. And, it doesn't really depend on anybody else's behavior. That's our own behavior. And if that's all it takes to really, to see, if we all did that for a month, 2 months, and if, we were able to then take control of this pandemic, great. And what do we have to lose if we find that that's not? We're learning something every single day about this pandemic and about this virus. And so those are the things that we personally can take care of.
Patty Olinger is our guest, infectious disease expert, executive director of the Global Biorisk Advisory Council. New swine flu perhaps popping up if we don't figure out a way to contain things. I guess this is in China. I read in the New York Times, spreading silently in workers on pig farms and should be urgently controlled to avoid another pandemic. This is what a team of scientists say. So getting back to this topic, what have we learned, Patty, in the lead time that we have, and how can we prepare before something like this potentially reaches our shores?
there's going to be a couple things. First of all, our pharmaceutical companies are going to be looking at this for vaccine strains. So they're going to be wanting to ensure that, the future vaccines for flu are going to contain some type of whatever they need to put in there for our own immunity towards this virus. The other thing is that I'm sure our USDA, is going to be looking at, they don't want it to get to our shores and then infect our pork industry. That's going to be very important from that standpoint. So they'll be doing a lot more screening, looking at that, looking at our own pork industry. There will be, a tremendous amount of research, I'm sure, looking at this particular virus, what type of, if the current antivirals will work on this virus. And so those are all good things with the lead time. And those are the types of things that will help us be able to fight this in the future if it does actually make that jump and become virulent and then ability to pass from human to human.
Assuming worst case scenario, is this country in a position or prepared to handle two pandemics?
That's a really good question. I mean, one of the things I would say is that, if you look at the work practices and the behaviors that we've been working on for COVID-19, it'd be the same for this pandemic. Again, the same simple things, washing our hands, not touching our face, again, wearing masks and social distancing. And then the other thing from a public standpoint, really paying attention to what I call is the scalable response for cleaning and disinfection, making sure that we add in the disinfection steps that actually work. And, on top of our routine cleaning, those are going to be important. For our healthcare industry, they are going to be looking at then needing to be able to decipher between two upper respiratory infections, and that's going to be, again, challenging for them. And so those diagnostic tests to be able to determine, is this COVID-19 or would this be the H1N1 flu will be very important.
Patty, let me ask you a hypothetical here. Say that we get on the other side of COVID, vaccine developed, let's say that the virus magically dissipates and we go back to life in normal fashion. What does normal look like for us as a society post-COVID-19 in our best case scenario? In other words, what I'm curious to ask you is what type of habits will we pick up? How will we, from a cleaning, disinfecting, and just being cognizant of virus, what kind of imprint is it going to leave on our lives, and how will we act accordingly?
When we look back at some of the more recent pandemics, like the swine flu in 2009 or SARS, or even the Ebola outbreak in 2014, too quickly do people go back to their old behaviors. And I think that if nothing else, some of the things that we need to learn from this is that if we adopt some of the behaviors, just the simple thing of during flu season, washing our hands and not touching our face, and at least keeping a social distance from folks, from our own personal behaviors. And then looking at what I would say is a scalable response. And when I say a scalable response with cleaning and disinfection, I look at, we have routine cleaning. Flu season starts, we add a disinfectant step in there. If then we see flu more rampant in the area, maybe we, increase our cleaning and we increase the disinfection step, and be prepared in the event that, if we do need to bring somebody in who really has the equipment to, really do a thorough job, that we look at a GBAC, for us, it would be a GBAC certified group. That being said, those are lessons that we can learn. And those are things that we can do to be able to be prepared in the event that there is a pandemic, a different pandemic that would come our way. And so those are the lessons, and I think those are parts of the new normal that we won't forget very quickly, because this is really devastating to our economy and to our people. No doubt. And, we want to take control and go forward.
Well, let me ask you this, Patty, one final thing here, and as it pertains to if you were to hand out report card grades for the United States of America relative to other countries, I feel as if we're a country that pays attention to, tries to be clean and disinfect, and we were, even before this, cognizant of germs and viruses, obviously even more so now. Do you believe that to be true relative to other countries? And I'll ask you the same question as it pertains to China, because you do look back at the history with the genesis of a lot of these viruses and strains, and there does seem to be the common denominator, whether it's wet markets or in this case on a pig farm. What could China do better on that front?
Well, those are great questions. Well, first of all, I'd like to step back and look at our own scorecards. What we're finding in the cleaning industry is that for many years that we've looked at things to look pretty and smell nice, and we haven't really thought of, are we verifying and validating that not only are we cleaning for aesthetics and making sure that it smells nice, but also the removal of dangerous pathogens when we really need to pay attention to that. We need to make sure that shift and that paradigm shift actually happens. And so going forward, I would say, our scorecard will go up, and it's because of the lessons learned. If we look at some of the viruses that have come out, Ebola came out from West Africa, obviously in the Congo here recently, and if you look at some of these economies where their behaviors and work practices are different than what we're used to, the wet markets, some of their healthcare situations, we see an epidemic or pandemic being able to emerge out of there. And I think one of the key factors in there is really the ability for things to move so quickly in today's world. Things in the past didn't move as quickly because we didn't have the transportation that we do today. And in today's world, something can go from one situation all the way across the world in really 24 hours. And so that, I think, is a very key thing that we need to pay very close attention to. And those behaviors that are, or those areas where we have high population density and, pockets of potential, we'll call exotic type, pathogens that maybe we're not used to, such as Ebola or Lassa fever or, some of these new and exotic flus. Those are things that, can really, we have to be careful about. And again, that prepare, respond, and recover, be prepared to be able to respond quickly so that we can recover from these emerging pathogens.
That's Patty Olinger, infectious disease expert, the executive director of the Global Biorisk Advisory Council, joining us here on KDKA Radio. We'll be back.